The Night Visitor. It was a quiet night, and the air was still. The moon was full, and it cast a silver glow over the suburban neighborhood. The man, his wife, and their 2 young children had just settled down for the night, ready to get some rest after a long day. The man, whose name was John, was a hard-working father who took care of his family. He was the kind of person who always put his family first, and he was always there to help them out whenever they needed him. But tonight was going to be different. Tonight, something was going to happen that would change their lives forever. As John and his family slept, they heard a strange noise coming from outside. At first, they thought it was just the wind, but the noise grew louder and more persistent. John got up to investigate, and as he looked out the window, he saw something that chilled him to the bone. There was a figure standing in the middle of the yard, just beyond the reach of the porch light. It was tall and slender, and it seemed to be looking right at him. John couldn't make out any features, but he could tell that it wasn't human. He woke up his wife and told her what he saw. She was frightened, but told him to stay calm and that it was probably just a prank. They both agreed to keep an eye on the figure, and if it moved or came closer, they would call the police. But as the night wore on, things got worse. The figure didn't move, but it seemed to be watching them. John could feel its eyes on him, even when he closed the curtains. He tried to shake the feeling, but he couldn't. He felt like he was being hunted. At around 2 a.m., the family heard a loud noise coming from the basement. John grabbed a baseball bat and went to investigate. He found the door to the basement open, and he could hear something moving around down there. He turned on the light, but it flickered on and off, making it hard to see. As he walked down the stairs, the feeling of being watched got stronger. He tried to shake it off, but he couldn't. He felt like he was being followed, and he could hear something breathing behind him. When he got to the bottom of the stairs, he saw something that made his blood run cold. There was a figure standing in the corner of the basement, and it was staring right at him. This figure was different from the one outside. It was smaller, but it was still not human. Its eyes were glowing, and it seemed to be looking right through him. John tried to run, but he felt like he was stuck in quicksand. He couldn't move, and he couldn't speak. He was paralyzed with fear. The figure started to move towards him, and he could feel its breath on his face. He closed his eyes and tried to scream, but nothing came out. The next thing John knew, he was waking up in his bed. He sat up, gasping for air, and tried to shake off the nightmare. But when he looked around, he saw that he was not alone. The figure from the yard was standing in the corner of the room, and it was watching him. John screamed, waking up his wife and children. They turned on the lights, but the figure didn't disappear. It just stood there, watching them. John tried to get up, but he felt like he was glued to the bed. He was trapped, and he couldn't move. The family was terrified, and they tried to call for help, but their phones weren't working. They were cut off from the outside world. Continue. And they were trapped in their own home with a terrifying visitor. As the figure in the corner of the room started to move towards them, John's wife and children huddled together, crying and pleading for it to go away. John managed to break free from his paralysis and stood up, still clutching the baseball bat from the basement. He charged at the figure, swinging the bat with all his might, but it didn't seem to have any effect. The figure just kept coming, and John could feel its cold breath on his face. He was about to give up when suddenly, the figure disappeared into thin air. The family was left alone, trembling and trying to catch their breath. They didn't know what to do or who to call. They were trapped in their own home with a night visitor they couldn't explain. The rest of the night was spent in fear and paranoia. They kept the lights on and barricaded the doors, but they knew it wouldn't be enough. The night visitor had shown that it could appear and disappear at will, and they had no way of knowing when it would come back. The next morning, they decided to leave the house and stay with a relative until they could figure out what to do. They packed their bags and left the house, but as they were leaving, they saw something that made them stop in their tracks. There was a message scrawled on the front door, written in what looked like blood. It read, "I'll be back." The family never returned to that house again. They sold it to a developer, who tore it down and built a new house in its place. But John, his wife, and his children would never forget the night visitor. It had left a mark on their lives that would never go away. Years later, John heard about a similar incident that had happened in a nearby town. A family had reported seeing a figure in their yard, and it had come into their house and attacked them. The police had never found any evidence of a break-in, and the case remained unsolved. John couldn't help but wonder if the night visitor had struck again, and if there were more families out there, living in fear of the unknown. He knew that he would never forget the night visitor, and that it would haunt him for the rest of his life.